Here's what my cousin's loss ultimately taught me, though the lesson didn't arrive all at once. It came slowly, through reflection, discomfort, and regret. It taught me that grief doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in routines, in politeness, in silence that feels almost respectful. Not all grief is visible, and that truth changes everything. We are conditioned to respond to pain. We can see tears, collapse, emergency. But silent grief asks something different of us. It asks us to notice what isn't being said. Silence is often misunderstood as stability. Calm is mistaken for control. When someone isn't falling apart publicly, we assume they're managing privately. That assumption is comforting, but it's often wrong. My cousin's silence wasn't peace. It was containment. It was effort. It was the exhausting act of holding pain in so it wouldn't spill into places where it felt unwelcome. That realization forced me to examine how I interpret strength. For years, I believed strength meant enduring quietly. I admired people who carried on without complaint. I didn't question what that endurance required from them. Strength without support, I learned, doesn't remain strength forever. It slowly turns into isolation. When someone is always strong, people stop checking in. They stop offering help. They assume it isn't needed. My cousin had been strong for so long that vulnerability felt foreign. Asking for help felt like failure, not relief. That belief didn't come from nowhere. It was reinforced by years of praise for endurance. Isolation doesn't always look like loneliness. Sometimes it looks like being surrounded by people who assume you're fine. It looks like conversations that skim the surface because no one expects depth from you anymore. I realized how often we reward people for hiding their pain. We compliment composure. We admire control. We rarely ask what it costs to maintain that image. The third lesson was perhaps the hardest to accept. Empathy matters more than advice. Sometimes it matters more than solutions. My instinct had always been to fix, to reassure, to offer perspective. But pain doesn't always want to be solved. Sometimes it just wants to be acknowledged. Sometimes the most healing thing you can say is, "I see you," without adding anything else. Presence can be healing in ways words cannot. Sitting with someone in their discomfort, without rushing them toward positivity, is a form of respect. It says their experience matters as it is. I think often about how close we came to missing the depth of my cousin's pain. How easily time could have passed. How routines could have resumed. How silence could have been mistaken for recovery. That thought unsettles me. It makes me wonder how many people around us are quietly breaking while we assume they ray fine. How many co-workers, friends, relatives are surviving instead of living. We ask, "How are you?" as a formality. We accept, "I'm fine," as an answer. We move on quickly because slowing down feels inconvenient. But what if we didn't? What if we listened longer? What if we allowed pauses to exist without filling them? What if we didn't rush to make discomfort disappear? I've learned that checking in once isn't enough. People often say they're fine the first time, because honesty takes safety. It takes consistency. It takes trust that vulnerability won't be judged or dismissed. Listening longer means tolerating silence. It means resisting the urge to redirect the conversation. It means staying present even when you don't know what to say. This story softened me in ways I didn't expect. It changed how I watch people, how I notice shifts in energy, in tone, in engagement. It made me more attentive to absences, not just presences. It also made me more compassionate with myself. I realized how often I, too, hide behind functionality, how easily I minimize my own struggles because they don't seem dramatic enough. Healing, learned, doesn't begin with fixing. It begins with being seen, with having your pain recognized without comparison or judgment. When someone finally feels seen, something shifts. The weight doesn't disappear, but it becomes easier to carry. Isolation loosens its grip. Empathy creates space. Space to breathe. Space to speak. Space to rest. It reminds people they don't have to earn care by performing strength. I now believe that awareness is a responsibility. Once you understand how silent grief works, you can't unsee it. You can't pretend absence always means peace. We live in a world that moves quickly, that values outcomes over experiences. Choosing empathy is a quiet act of resistance against that pace. Checking in, listening deeply, staying present. These actions won't fix everything, but they can prevent someone from feeling alone inside their pain. I still don't have perfect answers. I still hesitate sometimes. I still worry about saying the wrong thing. But I've learned that saying something imperfect is often better than saying nothing at all. If this story stays with you, let it slow you down. Let it make you curious instead of certain. Let it remind you that strength is not the absence of need. Check in with the people who never complain. Listen to the ones who say they're fine too quickly. Notice who carries more than they should. And remember this above all else. Healing often begins quietly. It begins in moments of recognition, in shared silence, in being seen without having to explain. That is the kind of presence we can offer each other. That is how we honor the losses we cannot see. And that is how stories like my cousin's can lead not just to reflection, but to real, human connection.